All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. My name is Lara Deutsch, and I am one of the co-organizers of Where Can I Go with a Music Degree with my wonderful colleagues, Dr. Amy Hillis and Dr. Cindy Tong. Before we start, I'd just like to say an enormous thank you, of course, to our collaborative partner this year, NYO Canada, as well as to our presenting sponsor, Long and McQuaid, who are helping us bring these discussions to you for free. We are so grateful. I apologize for the state of my voice. My very sweet daughter loves to share, and she gave me her daycare germs, but we're going to have a great conversation nonetheless. A couple of housekeeping things. So firstly, we have a chat available. The chat is really just to say hey to your other attendees, let us know where you're tuning in from, or if you have any thoughts that resonate with what the panelists are saying, feel free to share those with everyone there. In terms of questions, though, if you have questions for our panelists, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. You can send the questions to us, and you can either direct them to the whole panel or to a specific person if you'd like. And in the last 20 minutes or so, we'll be doing as many of those questions as we can. So please do submit them, ask us your burning questions, and know that you can also submit them anonymously if you don't feel comfortable attaching your name. That's totally fine. So for those of you who are new, Where Can I Go with a Music Degree was something we started last year as an answer to some questions we asked ourselves. And one of those questions was, if we could go back in time and tell our 18-year-old musician selves something, what would it be? What do we wish that we could have known back then? And that has sort of inspired a lot of these discussion topics. And one of the things that is really common and still common now is that there aren't a lot of paths in music that are highlighted in academic settings. So often we sort of hear about, okay, you can go win a job in an orchestra, or you can become a soloist, or you can teach, but that's it. And the reality is, in today's musical landscape, there are so many people who do many other things that are incredibly fulfilling, that are creative pursuits that they really, really enjoy. And so we want to normalize a wider range of career paths for a success in the music industry. And I cannot imagine three better panelists to do that with this morning. These are all people who, quite honestly, don't even play instruments that would be able to win an orchestral job. So they've carved their own paths. I would call all three of them trailblazers. As I was researching and preparing for this morning, I was just in awe of the three of them, even more than I already was. So I'm very, very excited to introduce you to them. I really hope that you'll ask them questions because I know that they will have a lot of really interesting insights and valuable knowledge to share. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce them one by one so we can get our discussion started. Our first guest is Miki Sawada. She is a pianist and the founder and director of an organization called Gather Here. Gather Here has a mission to foster human connection and dialogue across socioeconomic and political differences. And what's amazing is Miki throws a piano into a back of a U-Haul and drives to places that would never otherwise have classical music and makes connections with people that are meaningful through music, which is an incredible, incredible thing to be doing. She's also just casually an ultra marathon runner. For those of you who don't know, an ultra marathon is 100 miles. And she started a business class for classical musicians who want to learn to run, and she coaches them. So she's got all kinds of projects. Miki, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
We're so excited to hear from you. And our next guest is Aria Umezawa. Aria is an incredible Canadian stage director, producer, and writer who is very much changing the culture of opera creation. She's the founder of two opera companies, both Opera 5 and Amplified Opera, the latter of which is an organization that produces shows to amplify diverse voices, invite conversation, and challenge the status quo. They were named the Disruptor in Residence, a title I love, at the Canadian Opera Company, because Amplified Opera is very much challenging the norms of what has been in the past considered acceptable, both in the repertoire and culture of classical music. And there are some really problematic issues that they're working to correct. So we have so much that we can learn from Aria. Thank you for being here. And finally, we have, last but not least, Dr. Michael Bridge. CBC has named him a wizard of the accordion, which is absolutely true. He is the most recent winner of the 2024 Virginia Parker Prize from the Canada Council, which is awarded to only some of the most talented and impressive musicians in our country, and he is so deserving. He's created this amazing career for himself, playing all over the world as an accordionist. The Met Opera needed an accordion player, and they called Michael. And not only that, but he has proposed and created a course about the business of music that he now teaches at the University of Toronto. And he's used his experience touring and all that nitty gritty of visas and grants and how to present yourself. He's coaching young musicians on those very important skills that we don't necessarily learn in our musical training. So, Michael, thank you for being here as well.
Thanks so much for having me. You're an amazing host.
That's very sweet. So I want to get this kicked off because everyone's done hearing my beautiful voice right now. I would love to hear from all of you. So just to kind of start off our discussion, I want to hear from your perspective, of course, how you would describe your projects and your goals, but just from the lens of finding a problem or recognizing a problem in our musical landscape and then doing something to work towards correcting it. So I know all of you have noticed gaps, whether it is for the audience experience or access to music, or for musician training. So if you can tell us a bit about your projects and why you started them, like what spurred you to want to embark on your musical project journeys. So let's start with Miki.
Yeah, so to clarify, I'm in the United States. So Gather Here is based in the US. And well, it all started in music school, like in graduate school, when I started feeling a disconnect between life inside the music conservatory versus everything that's happening outside. And I happened to be going at a school at the time where that divide was like so dramatic. And I kind of started getting depressed, just like with the lack of connection with the world that I habit when I like go grocery shopping or whatever. And so that's something that was like a seed in me for a long time. And I didn't quite know how to address that. And then fast forward almost 10 years when Donald Trump was elected the first time, um, I wasn't really sure. I started thinking like, well, what's the point of being a classical musician in these times? Like it's at that time I thought it was the worst, the lowest point, yet we are here lower even today. But at that point it was shocking to me and it made me like rethink my priorities in my life and my career. And also at the time I'm from Japan and I was going through the immigration process to try to settle here in the United States and I didn't even know if I wanted to stay. And I thought about it and I realized, like this is where I've committed myself to. And there are things that I think are great about this country. And there are things that are terrible about this country. But instead of, kind of separating myself from that, I wanted to use music as a way to explore that and even try to make this place a better place. So I had the idea that like if I put a piano in a van and I go to places where, you listen to the news and people are talking about how bigoted and hateful these people are and how can they possibly think these things that I would never believe in and like pointedly making a point of going to those places and getting to know those people through music and trying to find some kind of connection. And I felt like that was the only way that I could have hope in this country and, in my career path. And yeah, since then it's really blossomed and here we are 8 years later and the work continues very
Yeah.
much.
I think that's so beautiful. I actually was getting chills as you were talking because at the end of the day, especially when we're training, I think a lot of us can relate to this. We get so hung up in the perfectionism of all these little details on our instruments, and we really can lose the point of why we become musicians. And I think you've totally hit the nail on the head. Like that connection, that moment you can have with someone you would never otherwise have a chance to meet, and the impact that you can make on their life, especially at a challenging time, is really impressive and really meaningful and quite a privilege. So thanks for sharing that, Miki. I'm going to jump over to Aria. So Aria, can you tell us a little bit about your journey with Amplified and Opera 5?
Sure. I mean, I think there's a lot of overlap in the things that Miki and I were responding to. I started out as a vocal performance major at McGill University, quickly realized that that was like not, I didn't like performing. It wasn't something that felt rewarding. But I loved rehearsing. I loved collaborating. And I think one thing that has always, and I've been trying to say more and more as I talk about the work that I do, is I believe just at my core that opera, classical music is very powerful, beautiful, and beneficial. Like, I think people who engage with it can have really profound experiences. But as I was going through school and as I was starting my professional career, I just started noticing the invisible barriers that were in place in the way we teach classical music, in the way we present it to the public, and in things that are just sort of like coded in now canonical, like the actual works that we present sometimes. So I like to say that my career has been about identifying and removing barriers to access, whether that's like we meet our audiences where they are, like Miki's doing with Gather Here, and or whether it's about like really listening to communities, understanding like what those barriers are, and then working to remove them from the opera house, from the recital hall, from what have you, or really interrogating what the underlying thesis of the programs we're presenting are and what the barriers might be there and going into them and using them as a springboard for inspiration. So I was just doing some consulting work last week and I said to the group, I feel like people think I'm coming at them like waving my fingers, being like, you can't do this. This is terrible. But truly, where I'm coming from is just a profound belief in the beauty, in the possibilities and the potential of classical music. And I just see that we've put all these things in our way that prevent the public from truly experiencing it the same way.
I 100% agree. And just I'm really familiar and just honestly so interested in what you're doing with Amplify. But can you give our attendees an example of a particular barrier or a norm? Like I know you have a project, for example, around Madame Butterfly, which is problematic for a few reasons. Can you give us one example of something like that?
Yeah, so I mean, the problems with butterfly could be a conversation in and of itself, but let's like just take that as a piece. Madame Butterfly, one of the sort of most clear examples of Orientalism in the operatic canon and something that is presented over and over again without question. And I'm half Japanese, so when you're a Japanese artist in the opera industry, you're very much pigeonholed into this opera, for lack of a better term. Like you can't get hired for anything other than butterfly, but for butterfly you're like just perfect. So you're tasked with like repeating this show that is both like incredibly inaccurate and problematic at its core, and you're adding legitimacy to it through your identity. So a Canadian soprano, Teo Kasahara, they're a non-binary soprano who is just really creative, decided that they wanted to, or I should update that. They just came out as transmasculine. So anyway, they have been exploring like what does it mean to be half Japanese in North America,
Mhm.
trying very much recognized for the ways that you're racialized and working in the classical music industry. And what came out of that was the Butterfly Project, where we say we're creatively appropriating the music of Puccini and re-putting it back together to create a new lens for the music. So um, it's like a little electroacoustic, it's a little Puccini, it's a little Japanese folk song, and it's all kind of mushed up together and presented in all its glory.
I love that. And it's changing the way we think about representation, right? And that is so important that the people that we are playing for can also see themselves in a way that is authentic on the stage. Turning over to Michael. So Michael, for you, I mean, you are obviously this incredible accordionist, but it's challenging when you don't play as standard of an instrument. I'm a flutist, and I even find that, presenters are often very much looking for strings, piano, and voice, right? So, you've created this amazing path for yourself, and I'm imagining you've hit some resistance. So I'd love to hear a little bit about that. And of course, to this course that you've created, what was the inspiration for that?
Most definitely. Uh, for myself, I started performing. I was about 11 or 12, and I started performing in retirement homes in Calgary, where I grew up. And I did a lot of that. At first, my mom would come and she would talk. Now Michael will play this. Now Michael will play that.
Love that.
And then maybe 2 years later, I was like, no, give me the microphone. I want to talk. And became fairly microphone happy after that, which I still am on stage. And back then, I was a folk accordionist. I had not even played on an instrument with the right keyboard layout uh, to do Baroque transcriptions, contemporary music, all sorts of good stuff, which I started when I was 16. So then I went on the path of let's become a classical musician. Got lots of training in that at the University of Toronto. Um, I have been trying to link together my various musical identities since I was about 20 and since I started the classical career path because I have this background as a folk musician. I can play by ear. I learned like how to jam around a campfire. Like
Right.
legitimately, that was my
Yeah.
favorite thing to do as a kid. How do you put that on stage? Or like, can you? How do you use that? And I've felt in my work with my groups in classical music, um, then trying to slot into the various molds that are available with presenters, concert halls, orchestras. Like, how do you bring all these things together? Which I'm sure is a question everyone can relate to in their own way. And it has taken me until today, years old, though I continue to figure it out, uh, to finally start doing some things that I think bring these together. For example, I kind of stopped referring to myself as a classical musician a few years ago.
Okay.
I was like, what's the most appropriate word? Well, I've gone with concert musician at this point because everything I do, whether it's a folk arrangement or a classical work, is presented in a way worthy of being listened to with focused attention. At least I hope so.
Yes,
It's
absolutely.
designed for a concert stage, dark theater, lights, sound, haze, everything. Um, but beyond that, it could be literally any genre. And I like to fuse genres, straddle genres. That I found that to be the most interesting thing that I can do musically because there are kind of no preconceptions well, there are preconceptions as a folk accordionist.
Right.
I try to shock and surprise and mystify people with these types of fusions and bringing it all together that way. So for me, it's been a little bit of a quest for uh, musical belonging and being able to put all of who I am together in one project, which
Right.
is tough. And now I've spent a decade plus touring pretty intensively all across Canada. And then with my duo, Bridge and Wolak, we work primarily in the US. And we've now done more than half of the US states over
Mhm.
years. We just passed that this fall, we figured out. So I've figured out some of the touring things, how to market, how to attend showcases and conferences and build relationships. So I've put that together in this course because that is part of me too. And I'm super passionate about sharing that with young musicians, not just so that they can go and be business savvy right away, but so that
Right.
you can make artistic projects that are business informed, if I can put it that way,
Yep.
where you kind of have everything in your head and then you can put it and funnel it into something that may work.
Right. And I love that you said that because it actually is a quite a nice segue into where I wanted to go. As an aside, again, if anybody has questions, like now is the time to ask these fantastic people the specifics of, how did you get started? How did you get funding? Those types of things. Like, please feel free to pop those in the Q&A. So what I'd like to ask the three of you is, so you have this idea, right? You've all kind of talked about your motivations and you have an idea, and especially when you kind of just graduated school and you're thinking, what next? What's the first step? Like, what's the first step you take into building an organization? For example, like Gather Here. I know that you got charitable status recently, so people can donate officially and get a tax receipt to your organization. Like, where do you start when you have such a big idea? It can be quite overwhelming. So feel free to, if anyone jump in, but I see Miki, you've unmuted. So why don't you start us off?
Where did I start? I actually started by writing a grant, which might be unconventional. And that was like maybe the first grant I ever wrote, even. But I think it's just a good framework to start thinking in because you need to be able to articulate pretty early on why you're doing this, what's it going to look like, who are your potential partners, and yeah, just having that early is good. So maybe look at a sample grant application. Um, that's good. And then because of that grant, I had to have a couple confirmed partners right away. So like a year before this tour was going to happen, I already had cold contacted two organizations in rural Alaska who thought this was a great idea and they were so excited. And, like this was the first time I had told anyone that I wanted to do this thing and to get real feedback from total strangers that this was something that they would really enjoy and they need. Um, First of all, that's going to help you with your grant, but also for me personally, it was really a motivating factor
Right.
that I'm on the right path.
And I think those partnerships, as you said, are so important because the more people you can get on board with an idea, the more strength that has. But kind of following that, and I know Aria and Michael can speak to this too, out of curiosity, for however, for every like 20 emails you send or calls you make, how many responses do you tend to get? Oh, sorry, Miki, I meant specifically. Yeah.
I sent, oh, by the way, I didn't get that grant, but it's fine. Like I found another one later on and it got funded, but that's beside the point. Grants also, I get rejected 90% of the time.
Yeah.
Emails, cold emails to potential presenters, I would say maybe a third of the time I get a positive response, but
Okay.
I'm pretty targeted about who I contact.
Right. But this is so important for people to hear because I think, we sometimes get rejected and we think, oh, everything else is always working out for other people. But the reality is people often just don't talk about when they get rejected, but it happens a lot and you have to keep at it. Michael or Aria, did you want to add something to that?
I think that that's really like this idea of just putting yourself out there is really great. I think I would add, um, I really do a lot of listening and like talking to people first, just to really understand like what the need is. Is there a need? Do other people share? Like, have other people seen the same need that I see? And if so, like, what are they thinking about and how that might be addressed? I think then by the time there's like, we might get into it later, but was trained in something called design thinking, which was how to create tests for problems that you see out in the world. And it always starts with empathy work. You always go out there, you speak to the people you're trying to reach, you speak to the communities you might be trying to engage with, you speak to the people you might want to collaborate with, and you get as much information as possible. And you'll find that like themes start to rise to the top. And if you take those themes, then by the time you get to your grant application, you have a much more persuasive case
Right.
for you also have a list of partners who, when you talk to them, when you send that cold email, you know what they're looking for, so you can tailor that email to make it make sense and resonate and increase the chances that you'll get an email back. And by the time you go asking for money, you already have a really clear sense. You can speak with authority that there's a case to be made for them giving you this money because you know where it's at.
Right.
So I think everything that I do always starts with a good amount of just talking to people and as many people who hoping to reach that will give me any time. And like, then you get to drink a lot of coffee and meet a lot
Yeah.
of really cool people. So
Yeah.
it's a win-win. Yeah.
Yeah, you never know. I know there's something, I think it's called the 100 coffees rule, where you ask 100 people, hey, do you have time for a coffee? And you see where that goes. And maybe only five of them will amount to something, but that five can really set you off on your path. And in those processes, I think it helps you kind of streamline what your idea is so that you can market it better. You get your pitch kind of in line. Michael?
Couple quick thoughts additional to these wonderful thoughts. Relationship building comes down to chemistry and timing. And emailing or calling or something to somebody at the wrong time. For example, the booking cycle is for a lot of presenters is largely about October through end of February-ish when they're actively thinking about who to book for the next year. That's just one example. If you email in May, you're probably late. If you email on the 25th of August, you're like a little too early. Like, so timing matters very much. And the reason I'm saying that is if you don't hear back, don't think of it as a rejection. It could just be that the timing was wrong. And particularly if you're doing cold emails to somebody that you don't know, they don't take it as an offense if they don't get back. It could be either a misfit or just the wrong time. Um, I wanted to also say that the idea of a coffee chat is great because in-person relationship building the is the only way to build strong relationships, not Zoom. Zoom is better. Phone call is good. Email, okay. But like the more in-person time that you can get, fly somewhere, meet somebody, be there in person, and um, that really just has a different kind of presence. Realizing also that, I mean, all of us are relatively young in the industry. I suspect a lot of people listening are as well, probably under 40, most. But realize that a lot of people who are working in the industry may be decades older than you and did not grow up with all sorts of technology. So just bear that in mind that the in-person touch is really, really critical.
Right. I'm curious, Michael, what's your opinion on like how many times can you follow up with someone? So say you have a presenter you really want to work with and you've contacted them, you haven't heard back, it's been a few weeks. Okay, is it okay to follow up? Is it
Yeah,
okay?
if it's been 2 weeks, absolutely. If you want to show a little more urgency, I would follow up maybe after about 3 days. But I would try to keep changing the method too. Um,
Right.
like just more emails where you can see your own emails. Like that's
Yeah.
not a good idea. I would try to change it to a phone call. I would try to get introduced. I would try to meet them somewhere. That's where booking conferences are so key. By the way, presenter, who was it? Cornwall Concerts in Ontario. I just played there and asked the presenter, how many emails do you get a year from
Right.
artists? And he, guess, he said, do you want to guess?
Uh, I don't know, 300,
1,500.
1,500.
They
Wow.
run
Even
six
for,
events a year.
yeah,
Six concerts. Most of these are truly spam emails, mostly from US agents, who are sending out what everyone can tell is a spam email. It's not personalized, and I delete those as fast as I possibly can because I get a
yeah,
lot of them. I'm sure you all do too.
yeah,
So trying to figure out how to not appear like a spam marketing email is number one, but then also going to conferences where these people will be in order to meet in person. That is kind of the threshold where, cold email people just get too many. You can't tell them apart. If you make the effort to go to somewhere where these people will be in person, you have a
right.
much better chance of building a good relationship.
That is fantastic, fantastic advice. And especially I think it's challenging after the pandemic too. We've all kind of fallen into Zoom and virtual and it's comfortable and it's easy, but often the when we get sort of complacent about things, we don't necessarily have as much success. Following up on what you said, I kind of want to ask the group now, how do you figure out what it is that you have to offer? What is special about your project? What does set you apart? How do you figure out what's driving you so that you can market that and have somebody, pay attention to what you're saying? Feel free, anybody to jump in on that.
Um, so to the last point, like how do you figure out what you have to offer? Um, I found this I found this website very helpful. The book was a bit bloated, but it's Simon Sinek's Find Your Why. And he makes the point that a lot of people can tell you what they do. So, like, I'm a stage director, or I'm a violinist, or concert pianist, or Canada's foremost accordionist. um, um, Fewer people can tell you how they do what they do, and
Right,
even fewer people can tell you why they do what they do. But if you can talk about why, like, why am I a stage director in opera? Why am I doing what I do? Then you actually tap into something very emotional that helps you generate language, helps you create a coherent story around the work that you do, helps you find partners more accurately and quickly. I would just like look at the website. Again, the book is like that's the thesis of the book, and then it's like 300 pages that you don't need to read to further understand that. Um,
Yeah.
but that is, I think, really, I don't think a lot of people think about why it is that they work in classical music. When I work with the students at opera, I work with master's students all the time in various opera programs across the country and in North America. And when you ask them why they're opera singers, a lot of them will blank. And then they'll say, like, oh, someone identified me as talented when I was a kid. And then now it's like 6 years later and I have a master's degree and I'm kind of freaking out because I don't know what to do. And like, maybe I don't even like opera, but now like so much money has been spent in this that I don't think I can do anything else. And then it's like a lot of spiraling.
Mhm.
So I think identifying like why are you here? Why do you want to do this? Is like both a good exercise for yourself to make sure that you're not,
Yep.
you're not just going with the flow, but also will help you make the case to other people. Um, when you're asking them for things or when you're identifying things that you want to pursue. Not every opportunity is a good fit for you, but
Right.
sometimes like this scarcity mindset compels us to take things and then we become more diluted. Whereas if you have a clear why and someone's like, hey, do you want to do this project that doesn't speak to your values? You have a lot more confidence to say no and filter out the noise.
Right. And then you're not spending so much time kind of wiffle waffling over every question or every offer because you have a really clear idea of what you want and what you need as an artist. I will mention just as an aside, there are lots of people who go into music, kind of like what Aria is saying, because that was what they were good at. Or people said, that this is the one thing you're good at, like go to music school, and then they find themselves at the end of music school, not sure that it's what they want to do. For those of us who weren't here last week, we have a panel and a recording of a panel from last week of people who pursued music, but then ended up doing something else. So we had a doctor, a lawyer, and a realtor, and they talked about how the skills they gained as a musician contributed to their careers and how it's helped them grow in different industries. And they still love music and they're still very passionate about it and they're successful in their lives, but they took a different route. So if you have a chance to go check that out, I highly recommend. Um, so Aria, you've kind of covered here the artistic direction of like why and what you want to do and passion and all that sort of thing. But the three of you clearly have some kind of business acumen because you've created these organizations and you figured out how to make them sustainable and also to be able to make money from them so that you can pursue these projects. So how does one go about designing a business model? Where do you get that expertise? Like where did you learn to do what you're doing? I'm going to start with Miki on this one.
I'm still learning. You just you figure it out as you go along. Especially with having started a 501(c)(3) nonprofit organization 3 years ago. It's a lot of learning the rules of the logistics and just gotta read and yeah, but what do I want to say? I mean, in the beginning, it wasn't financially sustainable, to
Right.
be perfectly honest.
Yep.
And I mean, Gather Here still isn't something that I do full time. I still pursue life on a normal concert stage on
Yep.
traditional um, concert series. And I think that's okay. I think it's okay if it's not the thing that you make your living off of. And for me, especially for the first maybe 5, 6 years, even if I wasn't making much money at all from Gather Here, just because people associated me with the project and they knew what it was about and they knew my playing through, all the media that I put out, I get offers for concerts because of that.
Right.
So that fuels my career in other ways, financially in the end.
Right.
So I think it's important to not place all of your emphasis on financial sustainability. And I'm in the process of growing Gather Here as an organization financially.
Right.
So that's interesting because that's making me think, like, okay, where am I able to get more sustained income for the organization? And the answer I'm finding out is that I need to have actually local activities. I'm in Boston, so I need activities in Boston and Massachusetts in order to be eligible for operational grants in Massachusetts, in Boston. And so that's made me research like where are the holes around here that I can help to fill through my work that I've been doing across the country, but no one here knows what I'm doing.
Right.
So actually this spring I'm starting a prison music concert project. And
Amazing.
as of now, there is no music at all in Massachusetts prisons. So I'm very excited to be doing that. I'm also starting up something in a homeless shelter. And, that fuels me here because now I feel like I have more roots where I live, which is
Right.
like a personal gap that I felt in the last few years. And so I'm starting to fulfill that. And hopefully, financially too, it'll lead to more stability. So it's
Right.
interesting how thinking about financials can redirect your work in unexpected ways.
Right. And what you've basically described, and this is something that I think is the reality for most modern musicians, is a portfolio career. Right. So especially if you play an instrument where it's less likely like to get a full-time tenured position. And to be honest, there aren't all that many of those. Some people do it and it's great, but it is important to be exposed to the fact that most musicians these days who are very successful and very fulfilled are doing portfolio careers. So having a bunch of different projects, and some of them may fuel you more creatively than others, and you use the sort of more gig work to fund your time and energy for those other projects. But that's, I think, an important thing to recognize. I wanted to ask Aria also this question because I know with Gather Here, and I'm sure also with the opera companies, like you, for example, have a board of directors, right? You've created sort of colleagues for yourself who help with this project. How do you do that? How do you, we all know you can apply for grants to get funding and approach donors, but like, how do you build a board of directors, for example?
I mean, the first board of directors for Opera 5 and for Amplified Opera were really people who weren't necessarily opera artists, but were people who knew our work and supported us, and crucially, who we trusted. Um, Especially when you're starting up an arts organization, like you really want to have the board just making sure you're staying on track, but you want people who trust you to um, enact the mandate, I guess, of the
Right.
organization, who understand that and are not going to like get you off the rails. So I'm trying to remember. I think for Corporations Canada, you actually only need 3 board members to start an organization. And you can go up to like however many you want. But there's no reason to start with like 10 board members if really you just need 3 in the beginning. And then as you start to, I love Miki, I call it Google and common sense. Like I didn't know how to start. Like what did I know about starting a business when we first got this crazy idea that we were going to start an opera company? We were like, how do you start a business, was like into Google, and then we read and we were like, okay, so it seems like we need to go to this like Corporations Canada website. So we like it was very, very much that. It's like, what is a tax form? Like that's pretty much all it is, or all it was for us as well. Um, and yeah, so like those, I would choose people sort of like in your network to start that are like very much on board with what you're trying to do, willing to support you, and just go with like the smallest group that you can sustain. And then as you start to grow, then it makes sense to sort of seek people, like network a bit more to find people outside of your close circle. But to
Right.
start, I would say just like whatever the minimum, which I'm pretty sure is 3. Yes, because
Yeah.
Amplified's board is 3.
Yeah.
Um, 3 people who really get what you're doing, and then worry about the rest afterwards.
Right.
Yeah.
One step at a time, I think, is
Yeah.
the important thing there. Michael, I see you unmuted, so I'm going to let you jump in before I ask you my question.
I wanted to just slightly loop back to the why, because that's a fantastic way of analyzing, like, why are we here and what is going on? Um, my partner, I'm going to quote her on this, Yolanda Bruno, she has frequently said this recently, and I don't know where she got it from. Go towards the thing that gives you energy. Um, and I think that's a super succinct analysis of, I might be getting ahead, but why am I a musician? Well, it actually gives me energy to do all of this. The
Right.
practicing, playing, being on stage, traveling, meeting people, the admin of it, I actually moderately like. At
Moderately
least
being the
at
keyword.
least some of it. Um, I like improving the process of doing the admin. I'll put it that way.
Right.
Um, and I think that's uh, something that can sustain you as you try to make these decisions about, well, should I become a company? Uh, how, where do we want to take this? A lot of companies, uh, big companies apparently start to fail because this is counterintuitive, because of previous success.
Right.
The point being that when you have succeeded a lot, you start being offered more opportunities, which then dilute the focus that led you to where you got at first.
Right.
So, saying no becomes very important. Valuing your time becomes very important. And to that point, Miki said something that I agree with totally, that like not everything should be about the financial goal. And it can feel really good to not to have something that brings in more money and something that brings in more heart. And that's true for a lot of us.
Yeah.
But the one thing that we all have the same amount of is time. So maybe you don't value things financially the same, but you should value your time in a tremendously focused way. And time management as a freelance career is like the thing that you have. So
Yeah.
we don't have time to get into it, but in my class, I've developed this Excel template that you could all design for yourself that is doing a concert booking, like what is every single aspect of running a concert? Obviously, you have to practice, you have to go there, you be on stage, sound check and rehearsal and all that. But other stuff, how many hours will you spend emailing, texting? How many hours bookkeeping? Maybe it's 0.25 hours, but
Right.
put it on there and set a rate, an hourly rate for every activity. And maybe you hate doing social media. So you've set that at $75 an hour to make yourself feel better. Another admin can be much less. Is practicing as physically taxing as doing emails? Well, in my case, accordion is very heavy. So I can't practice literally all day and I'm really tired after. So I would set a higher hourly rate for that. And then, you can just add up, first of all, what your actual cost ought to be in an ideal world for doing a particular activity, and you use your best guess to estimate it. But the other shocker is the amount of time. And this
Right.
is what every time I do this for myself, and anytime I'm not sure if I should accept an opportunity or go towards it, I add up the amount of time that I think it'll be.
Right.
Like for me, from Toronto to go to Sarnia, which is a 3 hour drive, and play a good concert and come back is 38 work hours. When I count transit time, all the practice time, like that's a rough estimate, but like
Right.
it's a full week of work. So when we wonder, why do I work all the time? And also, where's the money? Well, that might be where it's going. People generally don't realize quite how much time goes into their activities. So tracking that can be really, really insightful.
Right, because you're gonna see you're gonna see trends that you don't. It's like doing a budget, right? When you're spending a lot of money, and then at the end of the month you say, "Where did my money go?" Oh, it's all Uber Eats. I didn't realize how much I was spending on Uber Eats. It's that exact concept, which is fantastic. And I think it's important too to highlight. Michael said somewhat facetiously, I think, like I can't practice all day. There's so much emphasis put on practice in school, but there are so many other skills that you need to develop in order to have a well-rounded career. And if you are practicing all day, chances are you're probably practicing wrong. And there's lots of great resources on the internet to help you learn to practice efficiently and effectively to take better care of your mind and body. I'm going to put one mention out there because I think it's the best practice resource of all time. And I know we've got a lot of musicians in this webinar. It's the YouTube channel of Dr. Molly Gebrian. I know Cindy will pop that in the chat. She talks about how neuroscience research can help us learn to practice more efficiently and effectively, and it will blow everything you know about practice out of the water. So check that out. But back to the chat. So Michael, you've kind of started to touch on this, and I wanted to ask all of you this question while we're talking about the practicalities of starting your own projects and the money side of things and balancing with the passion. At the beginning, how much do you personally invest in a new project? Is it all time? Is it all energy? Is there some financial component or is it all grant based? I'd be really curious to hear. Maybe we'll start with Aria. Like an opera company is a pretty big thing. There's budget required. Like how do you start? Where does that begin and how much do you personally put into it in kind
Um,
of financial?
yeah, I love that Michael talked about like put a point on the fact that your time is money, like your time is valuable as well. Um, it was different when we were starting Opera 5. We were like 21 years old. Just try like this wacky idea. We wanted to do one show. It wasn't a company immediately. It was just like one show that we wanted to do. And because we like one of the motivations for starting Opera 5 did have to do with experience as well. We just found a bunch of people. We were like, none of us are getting paid, but this is something that we need to further our own careers at this point. No one's hiring a 21-year-old stage director at the Met. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Um, so like we actually do need experience. We don't really know what we're doing. And when we know what we're doing, we will be more valuable. So like this is an investment in our career. And those first shows were like, we split the ticket. We split the ticket take home. And that was like a few $100s. But like the value we were getting out of that was in experience. It was in like practical experience. It was in knowledge building. It was in determining like if the viability of our project in the first place. There was a lot we were getting out of it. Um, I think it's very, very good that we tell artists and creatives to be protective of their time and to make sure that people are not exploiting them, like saying that you can do this for exposure. I would also say like there is a little bit of a balance there in my experience where like sometimes you just like literally don't have the skills. And this might be a way to get the skills.
right.
Um, so now sitting here, if someone was like, will you help me for free for my like project that I'm dreaming up that I have no experience doing, I would say like, no, thank
Right.
you. Thank you so much for thinking about me, but I can't do this for you. Back when I was 21 with no experience, and I was like, you're figuring it out, I'm figuring it out, let's do this together. Like that was a
Right.
really different conversation. Um, so I feel like I've now drifted far away from your question and can't remember what it was.
It was just how much do you invest both in
Yeah.
and or financially? Yeah.
Yeah, so that was it. I think maybe we spent like for us it was costumes. We would pull from our own closets or go to Value Village. One set that we built that I think to this day is still the most beautiful set that we've ever built was 500 beer bottles and 15 kegs. And we just went around to bars and asked them if we could take their empties. And then we also had to promise to bring them back. So that was like a time investment of like
Yeah.
going around to bars in Toronto, getting their empties, remembering which kegs went where and which bottles went where, and coming back. Um, and it was gorgeous. So like we in terms of like actual money, maybe between all of us spent $1,000 to do the first couple shows of like displaced among 4 or 5 people. But our time, if you had been paying us for what we were doing, I think that figure would be significantly higher.
Right.
So yeah.
And I think I'm really glad that, and thank you very much for like being open and sharing it because I think it's important to see that you don't just start all of a sudden having this super functional project or company or organization, right? Like everybody starts somewhere and there are struggles in the beginning. You learn from those struggles and you grow. And then of course, I mean, there's going to be resources like grants that you're going to depend on as your project grows, but it's very much okay. And I would say like as I said, the three of you are so majorly impressive, and you've all talked about doing other things in the meantime while you're fulfilling these creative projects. And it is okay and very successful to do that. You don't have to immediately go win a tenure job somewhere to be fulfilled as a creative or a musician. Um, what about you for you, Miki? Was it mainly grants you started with like for the pianos? How do you get a piano rented
Yeah.
that's expensive, the van, all that stuff?
No, much like Aria's talking about, you got to trade off experience and money in the beginning.
Right.
I mean, for Gather Here to be a completely new thing that no one had heard of, how can you market such a thing without a track record? So, I I put my money in it first, and after the tour, I was able to fundraise enough from individual donors, and actually, I guess beforehand, I got a little grant from Alaska when I was
Right.
touring the state of Alaska. So it was probably like 20% from that grant and 80% fulfilled by donations. And yeah, I probably made a little bit of money in the end.
Right.
And I made sure to have a videographer with me the whole time from the get-go because I knew that footage was going to be important both to fundraise for that tour, but also for future tours. If I wanted to continue on, the footage was going to be absolutely priceless.
Yeah.
So actually, at that point, I got people who were around my age who needed the experience of being a videographer on the road, and they really wanted to go to Alaska, and they were excited about it. So, they weren't paid. The agreement was that whatever surplus I had in the end, we would just split equally between us. So
Right.
we were able to, share a little bit. And yeah, that pays dividends
Right.
over, yeah.
And
And the piano, I had a sponsor, so I was able to get the only piano store in Anchorage that had the type of piano I needed. I got them to be on board.
amazing.
Yeah, they were one of the very first supporters. And
Right.
yeah, I probably wouldn't be doing this now if they hadn't said yes at that
Right.
point.
Which is so cool. It's cool to see how those things just ripple out, right? And
Yeah, and like
cause
for
so
me,
much.
music and Gather Here is always about creating connections where they don't exist and where I can like kind of visualize that they might be able to exist if there is some magical force.
Right.
And that magical force for me is music. And so like connecting these dots in all these unexpected ways is just so fun for me. And yeah, even like this month I got invited to be part of this big big event that has nothing to do with music, and that's so exciting for me to be like invited in as a guest
Right.
artist because of this work I'm doing with Gather Here.
Amazing. As a side note, Miki was one of 4 pianists nominated for Most Inspiring Pianist in the World in 2023. So we are very lucky to be learning from her. One thing I just want to highlight that both Ari and Miki mentioned is that at the beginning, when you're starting out and you're sort of, it's almost like you're bartering, like you're trading, like I'll give you milk for eggs type thing. I think it's just setting the expectations with people around being like just being very clear, we probably won't have the funds, like this is what we can offer in exchange. And as long as everybody is on board with that, then you can move towards a singular vision together. But I think that clarity is important and also for building trust. Um, I have a couple of rapid fire questions I want to ask, but just before we do that, Michael, I had one more question for you. Um, and this is so interesting again to me as a flutist, and I'm sure to anybody who's here as, a brass player or just one of those instruments that's less sort of conventional for presenters. Um, how do you get attention as an accordionist? Like and of course now you've got this amazing career already, so it's much easier because you've got material and you've got albums and videos and all that kind of stuff. But at the start, how do you get people excited about something when they think an audience might not buy tickets for it?
Excellent question. Videos is the number one answer. So what Miki just said about, the quality of having good videos, documenting things for the future, like even have your phone, and I have in my backpack like the little octopus mount so that you can mount your phone anytime. Like it should always be in your backpack.
Right.
It's such a valuable little thing. I'm trying to remember. Um, I think that in booking a concert, you need to understand that a presenter has a problem and you want to be the person that offers a solution. Their problem is, how do I have a really happy audience?
Right.
Uh, how do I bring people into my concert hall? How do I bring people who aren't necessarily already coming? How do I grow my audience? Um, so those are the types of problems, if you will, that they are trying to solve. So if you do your thinking in advance, and particularly if you're a little unconventional, you can write up the promotional language that they can put on their website, like make it copy paste for them,
Right.
do their thinking for them, have the video welcome, have the promotional text ready, all the stage plot, like literally everything, so that what you do is super clear and they can see from the moment that you begin a conversation that you've solved all the problems and it's not going to be a risk. It'll go smoothly for them. So that's one type of strategy. Um, then meeting people in person, and also understanding that there are sort of two types of presenters in the world. One is a market-driven performing arts center, PAC, uh, also called like a brute force PAC, where they are trying to sell tickets based on the name of the artist that is coming in, and they're
Right.
trying to get to a certain number of sales for that night. So it depends on, basically, it depends on the popularity of the artist. Then there is this other world called the Community Concert Series, and this is all over North America. Barrie Concerts, Cornwall Concert Series, just a few in Ontario. But there are probably, I've never counted, so I have no idea. But I'm going to say there are probably 150 in Canada, and there's probably 1,000 plus in the US, like a lot. And these are series where people sign up not for individual concerts. This is the critical difference. They sign up for the entire series, and
Right.
they trust the presenter to bring five interesting acts that year. And they don't know, they don't even need to know the names of the artists who are there. So this is how I definitely got to start by because then you don't have to convince 500 people in a city to come and hear you who don't know you. You just
Right.
have to convince one presenter that you're really interesting and excellent and that they'll take a risk on you, but it's not a risk because they already have subscribers for the whole series. So
Right.
it's a much better fit in terms of you being able to get your foot in the door and then you deliver a great concert and then it leads uh, one thing can lead to another. So the community concert series business model and finding those for somebody like me is still probably 80% of my income through
Right.
that, not through market-driven PACs, though it is now going in that direction as I start to have a little more name recognition.
Right, which is amazing. That is super, super fantastic and very clear advice. So I appreciate you sharing that with us. One tiny follow-up question to wrap that up. So now, of course, we all have, these amazing computers and recording devices in our pockets. Back when all of us were in university, it was a lot harder to produce video. You'd have to hire someone through the school or do a recording. But so now, would you say, like, if you are going to invest some money into a really high quality recording to market yourself, or would you just do it with a phone and some at-home equipment?
Both
Computer.
probably, because you do have to keep up a certain regularity of content on social media, and that can be less quality.
Right.
Also, if you make a longer film, like if you do a video shoot with a professional, then you can keep breaking it up and using it and use a 30-second clip there, 30 seconds here, and create a lot of content from one session. And maybe like you do a photo shoot every 2 years, do a video recording shoot about every once a year. And if you can get a few different backgrounds, you can actually make it look like a few different things.
Right. So just be smart. Smart
Yeah.
and organized. Or I think organization is the theme here that it's kind of coming out with the three of you is just being on top of what you need to do, how much time it's going to take, what your goals, what your values are, having that all written down and accessible. So I see that the Q&A is quite active. If you have any Q&A questions, attendees, please, now is the time to keep throwing those in the box. But before we get there, I want to ask you each two questions, and these are our sort of our rapid fire questions that sort of tie in again to the whole point of where can I go with music degree. So the first question is, why are you a musician? And I think that you mostly have touched on that already, but I would love to just hear that in a succinct, why are you a musician? Because especially in the pandemic, I feel like a lot of people sort of feel like the arts are very cuttable. In school programs, the arts are what goes. And unfortunately, in certain political climates, that's also the arts are the thing to fund less. So I want to know why you're a musician and what motivates you, because I know that that's going to be something that a lot of people share. And the second question is, what is your definition of success right now? And is it the same as when you were 18 and starting out on a musical career? So those are two pretty big questions. I'll start with Aria.
Oh, well. So I don't actually think, strictly speaking, I'm a musician in the sense that I like don't I don't this or this.
You are, I like, we'll say, why are you in the music industry? You're
Yeah.
definitely in the, we'll say, in the industry. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think I have stories that I want to tell and stories that I believe in. And that's why I work in opera. Um, it's, I love what Michael said about going to what gives you energy because I think that that's very true for me. And I saw someone put the hedgehog concept. I think that was actually Yolanda, your partner, put that in the chat. Like,
Umezawa. That's the full
absolutely.
version over there.
Yeah, exactly. Um, so that's why I'm a musician. I love that opera reminds us that we need to listen to the music behind the words, especially in these days. I think a lot of people say things, and if we were to listen to the music behind it, we'd realize we are being led astray. Um, and then my current definition of success is in flux, actually. I just had my first child last year. My life used to look like 10 months on the road a year. We're doing various things, directing, what have you, touring, what have you. Um, and that was my definition of success for a while. And so, like, love that, got that out of the way. But now, um, I don't know, it's not feeling like something that would fulfill me now. So I'm in the process of redefining that for myself. And I will say, what was my definition of success when I was an undergrad? I think it was much narrower, actually. I think I had a much narrower definition of success when I was like the Met.
Yeah.
Doing something at the Met was like my definition of success at the time. Oh, thank you to Sue. Um, and I had like I had a path that I wanted to follow and I had my focus on and I was going to get there. And then as I sort of gained more experience, as I hit some of those milestones, I got more information and let them sit with me. I realized some of them fit, some of them didn't fit, and made new choices from there. So I think like back in my undergrad, if you had asked me, it was like the smallest version of success that there possibly could have been. And now I think it's much more expanded.
I love that. And that is exactly what I wanted to hear because I do think in a lot of musical training programs, with no bad intentions, it just sort of happens that there are a couple very narrow definitions of success and paths, and that's sort of all you're exposed to. And then when you don't necessarily follow that path, you feel like you failed. But that is not the case. Success transforms. I totally relate. I also just had my first child, and my travel is going to need to be cut back significantly, and that's okay with me. Like, because this is where I am in my life now. So I love hearing this. Thank you for sharing that. What about for you, Michael? Oh, I'm wondering. He looks like he's got
Sorry,
something.
somebody just came in. Um, in my case, I think I'm a musician because it gives me energy. I like puzzles. And this whole thing is kind of a puzzle. Like, how do you practice well is a puzzle. How do you use your time? How do you build a tour schedule? It's a puzzle. It's something you can engineer and construct. And I used to play with Lego as a kid. Now I play with calendars.
Right.
And success, yeah, for me, it was be considered legitimate at first. Now it is craft experiences that are meaningful to a lot of people, and that are powerful, that might have some kind of, I'm not a very political artist, um, outwardly so, but I do like to drop little nuggets and things into every show
Right.
that make little statements here and there, because we all have platforms. We're among the few people in society who have a big platform without necessarily having an agenda, like a politician who clearly has an agenda. That's powerful. So using that, and so success now is an economical use of my time preparing for family life. I'm also, thinking about that transition because my schedule is planned 1, 2, sometimes touching on 3 years out. So I
Right.
have to think ahead. Um, so I'm trying very hard to do that, to have a balance in life and to do projects that are my own that I feel very fulfilled with. For example, my next problem that I'm working on is silent film accompaniment.
Amazing.
with solo digital accordion. I've started doing it. It's super fun. That's going to be touring across Canada in the next few years. I'm starting to do a lot more of it, completely improvised scores for 90 minutes, guaranteed headache by the end, but I love doing it.
Melted brain by the end. Um, I love that, and what I picked up a little bit in what you said is that the success now in music, it sounds like it's more focused on the outward experience, like the gift and the privilege of being able to share music with people, as opposed to like I need to be super good, which I think is often what we end up focusing on when we're training.
And it's
Um,
okay
and that's totally fine.
yeah.
But that I think that as you get older and as you do more in the world, there's more of that why question comes in, is like, okay, I'm enjoying being super good at my instrument, but like what can I do with that? How can that serve people, you know? And finally, what about for you, Miki? So why are you a musician, and what is your definition of success?
Um, for me, music is infinitely interesting because it can be so many different things. Like primarily it's for me, it's a way of giving to others, giving to communities, trying to make the world a better place. But it can also be a personal source of joy, right? It's just going to the piano, playing for myself. Um, yeah, and it's a way of, like I said before, connecting the dots in this world that may otherwise never connect. So yeah, which leads to my definition of success, which is, like, is this interesting to me?
Right.
And yeah, it is. And like on a more like musician side, do I feel like I am always continuing to be a better musician
Right.
at the piano? Um, and I think those two things are probably the same as when I was 18, but what I find interesting has changed so much over the last decades.
In
And I'm
undetermined
finding
amount of
that
time.
I'm finding that like the more you pursue something like very focusedly, very pointedly, at a certain point, like the universe just kind of expands, which sounds really weird.
No,
And
not
like
at all.
I never thought about it that way. Like just in December, I was rejected from a grant that I was almost sure I would get. And I was starting to think about like logistically, okay, like how much do I want to grow gather here so that when I hand it over to the next person, I can put on a resume, like this is X number of growth that happened in numbers. I was starting to think like that,
Right.
which is really fine. But like just this month, I I if I can share my personal happy news, I was selected to be a sponsored athlete to run the most prestigious 100-mile race in the world. And it was like it was a DEI initiative because ultra marathon running is very white and male, but also they wanted to hear about our backgrounds. And I wrote about Gather Here and my experience being an immigrant and what does Gather Here have to do with me being an immigrant and my role in classical music. And what does that have to do with running in the mountains? And like
Yeah.
the company understood all of that and they like really gravitated towards Gather Here. And I just feel like my life has opened up because of that. And like things are going full circle in ways that I never would have predicted. And just a
Right.
month ago, I was thinking about selling Gather Here. So it's
Wow.
like that journey is really fun for me. Even the lows,
Yeah.
really interesting to me, even though they suck.
Well, congratulations. First of all, that is so impressive. I like it. There aren't even words to describe. I cannot imagine running 100 miles and have like just the mental strength that it takes for something like that. But I think that also goes to show like investing your time and energy into other aspects of your life that have nothing to do with music have benefits in so many ways, whether it is specifically health or even just when your worlds start to collide. I totally love that. Um, I'm going to move into the Q and A. I wanted to ask me one very specific question before I do that, though. Is there a particular story in your time driving around, rural areas in your U-Haul, with Gather Here, like a particular story that you connected with someone or a moment that like you're never going to forget that's, been formative?
Yeah, so all my tours are usually pre-planned. It takes months and months of planning to set up the concerts, but there was one tour where I decided not to do that in Louisiana, and I just drove around with an upright piano and I was just set up wherever we could find people, basically. Um, where there's not, which was pretty difficult because in Louisiana, no one just like hangs out outside in public spaces. And I was having a really hard time because, even if I set up the piano, people wouldn't really care. And so it was a lot of like rejection daily. And
Right.
then finally, I was just playing in this empty park. And this man, this homeless man who was living in that park, came over and he was like dancing to my Bach a little bit. And then he sang Amazing Grace while I accompanied him on the piano. And just that, like, the depth of connection I think we both felt in that moment, in those 3 minutes. And this is someone who comes from a completely different background from me. And yeah, just like everything I do with Gather Here was distilled into those few minutes. So that was really transformative for me.
That is super beautiful.
In
Did
that
you?
moment, you can see on Instagram, I think it's pinned as one of my reels.
Oh, I will go. I know I will definitely go watch that. That is beautiful. And that's the point. That's what music does. I love that. All right, so let's jump into this Q&A because I want to make sure that our attendees' voices are being heard. Okay, let's see. So, that's a good question. Is social media a good place to start your music career as well as advertising yourself? So, how does social media play a role in all of this? Anybody feel free to jump in on this.
I can say a few quick things about this. Actually, doing silent films last year is when this started, is the first time that I know for sure that I got a concert because of a social media post I made. I went 10 years wondering if any of my social media actually, did it actually lead to anything concrete? And it probably did. I just don't know about it. Um, my feeling about social media is it is so saturated and it's so low quality of connection that I would kind of say no. I think that in person, figuring out how to meet people, playing live, doing something, unless your model is to be online, um, my gut says no. It is a supplement to other parts of your activities, but I would focus more on real human connections, just to
How
be.
much? Oh, sorry. Go ahead. I was gonna say
No, I was saying just to be brief, that's what I would say.
how much do you think, like I know from my own experience applying to showcases and that sort of thing, they ask for all your handles. Like how much do you think those people are actually, when you're applying to showcases or presenters, how much are they actually looking at your social media?
I don't know a real for sure. Some presenters look a lot, some showcases look a lot, others will look, but they may not be that interested. Um, I will say that if social media and advertising yourself in that way is not your main focus, then finding pairing with presenters who really value that is probably not going to be a very good fit anyways.
Right.
So if you are I think you have to go with your strengths. If your strength is live in person, convincing people that you're an amazing artist, like just by playing for them, then you'll find people who really value that and who don't look quite so closely at it. I
Mhm.
guess what I'm trying to say is be you and don't worry about holding yourself back because you only have 200 followers online. Sure, try to build it,
Yeah.
uh, but don't think that you're not worthy because you don't have more.
Okay. That's fantastic. Do either of other panelists want to add to that, or are we all on the same page there?
Pretty much. I mean, just to sort of build off of what Michael said, I think there's no silver bullet. I think that is there's no silver bullet that's going to guarantee you a career. And I think social media is great depending on what you want the shape of your career to be. So, for example, I would be I would be lying if I didn't say that our web series, Opera Five's web series Opera Cheats, which I wrote and created and published, which explained opera to in like very simple terms, was like very formative in getting my foot through the door with a lot of companies and building a reputation and an authority in the space of attracting new audiences. So like for me, for that specific segment of like new audience building that I was interested in pursuing, like I can't I would be lying if I said it didn't matter. Now, if you go search for me, I'm not on Facebook, I'm not on Instagram, I'm not on Twitter, I'm not on anything
Yeah.
anymore, and I'm still working. My priorities have somewhat shifted, and I now already have that reputation with new audiences, so I don't need to keep pushing it
Right.
as much. But that might change. I might hop back on if I can't find the kind of work I'm interested in the future. So like I do think there's no silver bullet. Social media absent like a great craft is not going to get you booked for concerts.
Right.
But if you are like, yes, I'm the way of the future, here's how you get your new audiences, and you can't show that you've attracted new audiences in any way, then yeah, yeah,
Right. So it's really not a black and white question. I think
yeah.
it is quite nuanced. Okay, I'm going to move to a different question because we've got a bunch and I want to try to answer some more. Um, okay, this is a good question from Nicholas Kwok. What are the biggest struggles you faced after you first graduated? Did you find it hard to get into the main music scene as a fresh graduate? Anybody want to take that one? Big question.
Sure. My years after school were terrible, mostly because I had immigration fiascos that cost me like a couple years of my life and totally derailed my career here because I got bounced out of the country as soon as I graduated, basically.
I'm
Um,
sorry.
Thank you. All that to say, it worked out okay. I found actually a cruise job. Maybe people have heard of it. It was called Lincoln Center Stage, and it was chamber music on a ship. And I did that for a couple years, and that was amazing that I got to perform and get paid and have a place to live and work legally. So yeah, it was really tough. And but you learn as you go along and you still try to build your portfolio. And then Gather Here came shortly after, and then I got settled here shortly after. But I won't say that it was easy. I actually thought about quitting piano for a while.
Thank you for being honest. And I mean, I imagine you probably would not have imagined that you would be where you are now, right? And there's a bit of trust in the process. Aria or Michael, does one of you want to jump into on that before I go to the next question? Okay,
I think I already touched briefly on
okay,
it. Yeah.
perfect. All right, let's do. Okay, this is a good question. So I have a hard time figuring out what kinds of projects or activities I enjoy. Graduated from music university last year and did general program, didn't specialize in performance or composition, etc. I know I'm still young, but I worry that I won't ever figure out my calling, and I've always had a hard time making decisions. How do I learn my own passions, but also stay calm and not be hard on myself? That's a big question too. Michael?
I can try. I can give a few little things. Um, One, in terms of figuring out what gives you energy or what your passion is, I would recommend writing things down. But I mean that in a super broad sense. I mean like learn by doing. So if you have an idea for a show or a song, write it down, or record it, or put it on a napkin, or perform it for a friend. Like do something. In a program that my duo ran, Bridge and Wolak, the music mentorship program, we like to say that art in your mind, like the idea of it, sorry, let me say that again. The idea in your mind is not art yet. Art is when it is externalized in some way that others can interact with, either through a live performance or writing it, painting, video, whatever. So if you do things that allow you to have the real deep lived experience of doing different types of things, I think that it'll become clear pretty quickly, at least the things that you don't like. And knowing that is equally valuable, and you can start to narrow your focus. Part two, a change is not a failure. And we often think, I would really like to read you something. This was an anonymous question submitted by one of my students last year in my class. The last week was just anonymous questions, and all the students solved each other's questions. Somebody wrote, I think it would be embarrassing to have tried to pursue a career as an artist and to have it not work out. So embarrassing it sometimes feel preferable not to try at all and get a real job. Real words of one of my students.
Oh,
And the class came up with these answers. Organize yourself into your best attempt, focus on short-term success, and changing course is not failing. And I think that that last one, that's why I said it just now. Reorienting yourself, I've done it so many times. I'm sure everyone here has made small course corrections like every 6 months that you're aware of. And then there's the macro ones that you don't even know about. So, you know, figuring out that I actually want to be a sound engineer, and that's my way of being around the arts, or a fashion designer, or an arts administrator, or I want to use my musical knowledge like last week's panel to go into another field. That's not failure. That's a reorientation of direction to do what you've discovered.
well, and it's also learning and a growth opportunity, right? A lot of it comes down to mindset. It's the, the fixed or the growth mindset. It's like if a fixed mindset is I can't do this one thing, ergo I have failed. A growth mindset is I tried to do this thing and it didn't work out the way that I wanted to, so I'm going to pivot to something else. And I've learned from that moment, right? Life is a lot of learning and a lot of mistakes. Like if you don't make mistakes, you're not living. So I love that you shared that. Thank you, because I think that is in classical music, we're very perfectionism oriented, and perfectionism is a super unhealthy mindset because perfection is not attainable unless you're a robot. Like we are going to make mistakes. So it's learning that, even if something doesn't go the way that you planned, you would not have known that you didn't want to do that thing if you didn't try, right? Or that it wouldn't have worked out. You got to keep putting yourself out there. It's hard, but it's important. Um, One more question. Okay, so this is kind of related to the social media thing, but I want to ask it. This is going to be directed at Aria. So this is from Ariane Privot. She says, as a young opera singer still in training, with most of my experience coming from school projects rather than a professional career, how important is it to invest time and money in building a website? Is it an essential asset at this stage, or would it be wiser to wait until I have more professional experience to showcase? So this is similar to the social media question. Can one replace the other? Do you need a website? What do you think?
Um, I think investing in gathering the assets for a website might be important for like the next step. So like those recordings that we were discussing earlier and those like video assets, um, those are the things you'll send in for auditions, especially for like young artist programs and things like that moving ahead. A website, like I don't think I know a single casting director who looks at websites. Um, like the website, I think it's like something that needs to be maintained. It's work. Like when we were talking about how we allocate out our time, for me, I'm always like, what is the most effective use of my time? And if a website is like there and needs to be maintained, but no one's looking at it, I'm like, is this an effective use of my time? Like when I was deciding to come off of social media, I said to my manager, the second you tell me that I can't book gigs because I don't have social media, I will get back on social media.
Right.
And that was 3 years ago. So like for me, it's like, where is I have a finite amount of energy and time. Like, notwithstanding, I just want to be like present and happy in life and like there for my friends too and my
Yeah.
family. So, like,
Yeah.
that's also something I'm protecting in terms of my time. And anything I spend energy on, I want to make sure it's like the hardest punch I can possibly punch, if I'm going to spend my time on it. So, like, I would say those assets, those recordings are really nice recordings. If you have like limited financial resources, spend them on getting your recordings and don't worry about the website. And don't worry about the website until someone tells you, like, where was your website? Then maybe go for the website.
Would you put those recordings, say, like on YouTube so that when someone Googles you, they can still find you?
Yeah, like if you're on YouTube, if you are on Instagram or social media, like that's great too. You can also then show how people are interacting with your videos if someone asks to see. Like you can still there's many ways to put yourself out there. A website is just one tool, and I think until yeah, I would focus on the generating the content first, and then maybe one day you'll want to have an easier portfolio to access. Um, yeah.
Thank you, Aria. I'm gonna try to squeeze in two more. This question comes from Joel Blackshot. To any, where would you suggest moving in order to live in order to live in an active musical city? Montreal, Vancouver, Calgary, somewhere else.
Hard to say because not knowing where you're coming from, first of all. Bigger cities, like I live in Toronto, and it is very full. There's a lot of artists, there's a lot of people that live there. Um, it's also vibrant and diverse, and really cool. You might consider trying to pick a city that you think is going to be next. Like, I think Ottawa is continuing to grow. I know you live there, Lara. I think Ottawa is continuing to grow in its art scene. I think Calgary will. I think that but I don't have deep knowledge of this. I'm just saying if you do deep research into where do you think will be the city to be in 5 years or in 10 years, I think that's the right way to approach the question. Also, where can you find people that you can make a strong network with? And you can do that from wherever you live. Spend time in the city, figure out if you like it. But people make it for you. Like you can move to Toronto and have nothing, or you could live in Brandon, Manitoba, and have a network of 50 people and work a lot locally and go on tour from there. So I think people overplace, I would say, but think about the long-term future too.
And I think it's also okay to mention, like, you can consider other life factors. Like, is this a country I want to live in or feel safe in? Is this a city where there are people I know? Is it close to my family? Like, those things are important also to your mental health. So, making every single decision in your life based solely on work can sometimes backfire, even though that is what we kind of end up getting encouraged to do in the musical world. I'm going to ask one last question before we wrap up. In hindsight, this is an anonymous question. In hindsight, what could you have done better after graduating? Anybody have one of those, like, if I could go back in time, I would?
Not career wise. I mean, this is more just like craft wise. I would have paid more attention in theory class, and I would have taken a philosophy survey course. Like having to teach yourself what the hell Heidegger was saying in your 30s is not easy. And it just turns out, like to that time point, feel like I've been spending this part of my career playing catch up on things I probably should have been focused on in school. Yeah, it's like a beautiful part of your life to be in your undergrad. And I think I was so focused looping it back to what we were talking about, I think I was so focused and concerned about having a career out of music school that I forgot to be present during my studies and really focus on the things that would make me a standout artist. And yeah, so I think I would have taken the pressure off of myself. The career will figure out when the career becomes important, but like, man, if I knew how many arguments I would win with conductors just by having broken down my scores properly, I would have maybe taken my theory courses a bit more seriously so it wouldn't take me hours and hours in my later in life.
I love that. I will say for me, I wish the two big things I often say, well, the biggest one is I wish I had started thinking about mental skills training way, way, way earlier, like from day one of learning an instrument, because you can practice all you want and be as good as you want in your instrument, but if you don't have the mental toughness to deal with the pressure of performing in a concert or an audition or anything where there's something riding on it, it doesn't matter. So, like, thinking about that, being able to have mental toughness, training with somebody on that, I think that to me is my biggest regret. And not recording myself enough while practicing. It turns out your teachers have to repeat themselves a lot less if you record yourself when you practice and you go back to listen. All right, we've just hit 12:30. So there's two final questions in the Q&A that are both about how you organize your schedules and what your day looks like, which is a perfect segue into next week's roundtable. Next Saturday morning at the same time, Dr. Cindy Tong will be moderating a roundtable with Philip Chu, Adam Chicaliti, and NYO's conductor Naomi Wu about a day in the life, navigating the demands of a music career. And that's going to be all about the nitty gritty of, how much time do you spend on admin and how do you do your taxes? How do you fit in practicing? How do you, like eat and sleep? All that will be in that chat, so please join us. A huge thank you to everybody who attended today. Thank you for your engaged questions. And of course, thank you to our panelists, Miki, Aria, Michael. The three of you are wildly inspiring. I know that I'm leaving here today feeling so inspired with lots of new ideas, and I guarantee that our attendees are as well. So thank you so much for your time. Thanks, of course, to NYO Canada, our collaborative partner, and to Long and McQuaid for helping us present this. And I hope you all have a wonderful weekend.